Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Yevamot Daf Pei Aleph. Today's stuff is sponsored by Valerie Adler in honor of her daughter Anushka. Congratulations to our amazing daughter Anushka, who is today officially an MD. May you be blessed to heal many people and be a source of comfort to those in need, Ima and Abba. Today's stuff is also sponsored in honor of the Kolodny family on the occasion of Avidan's bar mitzvah. Mazal tov. Okay, we're going to get started with the very bottom of Daf Pei Amud Bet. So we were learning in the Mishna about a saris. So we have this issue of a saris who is choletz and chotzin, and then we have the saris who's not choletz and lo chotzin. And then we decided toward the end of the Mishnah, the last thing we ended with, since the end of the Mishnah says hasaris lo choletz v'lo miyabem, after in the beginning of the Mishnah it said, well, some can and some can't, and we were deliberating which one's which. So not deliberating, but we had two different opinions. Rabbi Akiva said one opinion, and Rabbi Eliezer said the other. Since the Mishnah ends with saris lo choletz v'lo miyabem, v'chein aylonit lo choletz v'lo miyabem, and they put the saris opposite the aylonit, they assume here that the saris who can't do this must be the saris who is like an aylonit, which means he was born that way. Okay, so that means the saris who was born that way can't do chalitza or yibum. That's what we ended with yesterday. And then that would follow Rabbi Akiva's opinion. So it's kind of telling you the Stam Mishnah, the general Mishnah, is like Rabbi Yochanan. Now we're going to quote, and what we're going to do is quote two more lines from the end of the Mishnah, and maybe I'll just read you quickly the end of the Mishnah. What we're going to do in both these next small sugyot is try to derive something from the Mishnah, and then say that derivation, if you're going to derive that way, it seems like our Mishnah doesn't hold by someone's opinion. The first case is going to be an amora, in the second case is going to be a tanna. In the first case, we're going to reject the suggestion. In the second case, we're going to hold the suggestion. It's going to be true. Okay, so let's read the Mishnah, and then we'll go to what we derive, and then we'll go to whose opinion does that seem to negate, and then we'll see whether we accept it or not. So the end of the Mishnah reads, I'm back on Ayin Tet Amud Bet at the in the middle, at the end of the Mishnah. Hasaris shechalatz liyibim tov, because a saris is not allowed to do chalitza. If he does it, lo psala. The focus of the end of this Mishnah is, does she become forbidden to marry a kohen, disqualified for marrying a kohen? So we say, saris, since he can't do chalitza to her, if he does chalitza, normally a woman who you do chalitza to, it's as if, right? It's similar to getting a get, even though you were never really married. And therefore, the rabbi said, well, someone who had chalitza is like a divorcee and can't marry a kohen. So if he does chalitza, she's not like a divorcee because it's a meaningless act, because there was no obligation of chalitza and he's not allowed to do chalitza. So therefore, it was a meaningless act. She can marry a kohen. However, be'ala, if he has relations with her, psalam, ipnei she bilatznud. Why is it a bilatznud? She becomes a zona if he has relations with her. Why is that? Because when there's no obligation of yibum, then what happens? The relationship between them is she was married to his brother. And any woman who's married to your brother is forbidden. Isur karet, right? Very severe. So if he goes ahead and has a relationship with her anyway, that's Isur karet, which means that she's now a zona and she can't marry a kohen. Likewise, aylonit, if she's an aylonit, shechaltzu la'achim lo psalua. If they gave her chalitza, right, they don't disqualify her. Ba'aluha, but if they had a sexual relationship with her, psalua, same reason, because it was forbidden for them because she was their brother's wife. Okay, so now the Gemara says, going back to Pei Amud Bet at the bottom, hasaris shechalatz libimto lo psala. So first we're focusing on the first one. Tama de ba'alahu. What they want to infer from this is, if he has relations with her, he disqualifies her. But if, let's assume there's a bunch of brothers, one of them is a saris, and he had relations with her, so he disqualifies her from marrying a kohen because, again, she was forbidden to him, mishum eshadach. But ha'achel, since it only refers to the saris, they say if another man, while she was in that situation, waiting for yibum, one brother's a saris, there's a few other brothers, she's supposed to do yibum with one of the other brothers, and before that, someone else has intercourse with her, then it would sound like she's not psula the kuna, because again, it's not really a very clear derivation here. And the Gemara is going to reject it, and you'll see why. But right now, what they're assuming is they're specifically saying the saris disqualifies her. But someone else who has a relationship with her wouldn't. Now, what would be the issue? Why would you think they would? Because, what do we know? At this point, when she's waiting for Yibum, she's called a Shomeret Yavam. She's not allowed to marry anybody else. Right? The only person she can marry is one of the brothers. Okay, not the saris, because, right, so he's on the out, so it's Eshet Ach for the saris. But for every other man, it's what we call an Isur Lav, right? It's a lo tase. She can't lo tiyeh esh tamet chutza leish zar. Remember that pasuk? She can't go marry anyone else until she deals with Yibum or Chalitza. If she does Chalitza, she can go marry someone else, or if she does Yibum and then gets divorced or he dies, then she can go marry someone else, assuming he has kids, if it was death. In any case, so they say, if you're going to infer from the Mishna, specifically the saris having relations will disqualify her, but anybody else would not, assuming you can infer that. This will go against Rav Hamnuna, who clearly held like Rabbi Akiva. Remember, Rabbi Akiva said, Chayve lavim are like Chayve kritu. So lo tiyeh ish tamed chutza leish zar, she can't go marry anybody else. That's a negative commandment. If you treat it very seriously, like it's karet, then if a woman who's supposed to do yibum goes and sleeps with some other man, she's disqualified from kiuna because she's called a zona. Remember, what's the criteria of a zona? Someone who does something that is a bilat znut, which would be something more severe, like karet. Or if you're Rabbi Akiva and you hold that chayve lavim are like chayve kritu for these purposes. So Rav Hamnuna clearly held like him, and therefore Rav Hamnuna had said very explicitly, shomeret yabam shezinta psula liyevama. If she's mazneh, right, she sleeps with somebody else, she's disqualified for, now here it's a little bit different. She's not disqualified for kahuna, she's disqualified for the Yevamot. She can now not do Yibum with one of the brothers. Why? Because the Yabam is considered like her husband. Remember Zika, it's as if they're married. And if she goes and is with someone else, biznut, as we call it, which Rav Hamnuna is holding like Rabbi Akiva, that by her sleeping with someone who, right, she's treated like an Eshet Ish here. And the forbidden, right, the fact that she can't go marry someone else is very severe, which means that it's just like a woman who's married to someone and sleeps with someone else, asur labal, asur laboel. She can't be with the person who she just had a relationship with, and she also can't go back to her original husband. Rav Hamnuna says the same is true with the Shomeret Yabam. She goes and is with someone else, which is only an Isur Lav, right? She's not an Eshet Ish, but he treats it as if she is. And therefore, she can't even go back and marry one of the brothers. So if you hold that way, then for sure you're going to think that she's a zona, in which case she's also disqualified for kahuna. So they're saying the inference from our Mishna seems to negate this, okay? Because it seems like our Mishna doesn't hold by him, because they say only if the saris had a relationship with her, it would disqualify her from kahuna. But if she had a relationship with some other man, it wouldn't disqualify her from marrying the kohen. She wouldn't be called a zona. That seems to go against Rav Hamnuna. To which the Gemara says, lo, don't infer that from the Mishnah. She can actually be with she could be with any other man. But if she was with another man, it wouldn't disqualify her from the kuna. She shouldn't do it. It's a lo tase, but it does disqualify her. I'm sorry, I just said it the reverse. Even with someone else, she would be disqualified from kahuna. She would be called a zona, like Rav Hamnuna. You could read the Mishnah in that way. Sorry that I explained the opposite a minute ago. I just got confused for a second, but let's go back. The saris disqualifies her, and any relationship she has with any other man, if she hasn't yet fulfilled yibum or chalitza, she's disqualified from marrying a kohen. She's a zona, like Rav Hamnuna says. You could read the Mishnah that way. And why did it only say the saris? Well, I did tani reisha b'didei, tani nami sefer b'didei. The whole beginning of the Mishnah was all talking about the saris. The whole topic here is the saris. We weren't talking about what's the status of a shomeret yabam and what if she goes with somebody else. That wasn't what the Mishnah was talking about. The Mishnah was all about a saris. So therefore, it only related to the saris. It didn't relate to what happens if she has relations with somebody else. So it doesn't necessarily not work in with Rav Hamnuna. It doesn't necessarily work in with him, but it doesn't necessarily go against him. Next similar structure, we're going to, again, read a line, say, oh, just that person, not something else, and then say it doesn't coincide with someone else's opinion. This time it's going to be a tanna's opinion, not an amora, and this time we're going to be successful. So now what did it say? If the brothers do chalitza, it's nothing. She can marry a kohen. But if they have one of the brothers sleeps with the aylonit, she's disqualified for marrying a kohen. To which they say, Tama de ba'alua, halo ba'alu halo. Sounds like only if they engage in relations with her. But just her, right? She's not disqualified. And this is a clear inference, not like the other one, which wasn't so clear. This means Kol od, right? As long as they haven't had a physical relationship with her, had relations with her, she can marry a kohen. Now, this goes against Rabbi Yehuda. Kiman de lo ke Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amal, Rabbi Yehuda said, we saw this already. He had this extreme position about an aylonit, that in general, a woman who has no simanei bagrut whatsoever, hamar aylonit zonahi, she's considered a zonah. Even if she hasn't had relations with someone, she's considered a zonah because relations with her don't lead to having children. It's a very hard opinion to kind of swallow, that we put her, again, it maybe because you have to remember, zonah doesn't necessarily mean prostitute the way we think of a zonah. We already saw that. And that she is basically, what it really means is, in other words, it's a way of saying she's disqualified from marrying a kohen. Okay, an aylonit can never marry a kohen. Remember we learned about an aylonit, she can't marry someone who hasn't had children yet because they have to fulfill the mitzvah and they won't be able to fulfill the mitzvah with her, right? She can marry someone who's had children already or has another wife, but she can't marry someone. And furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda says she can't ever marry a kohen. So that would obviously not match our Mishna, because our Mishna says only when they have relations with her does it disqualify her from marrying a kohen, because it was Yisrael Karet, because they weren't allowed to do Yibum, and therefore they were sleeping with their brother's wife, and that disqualifies her from marrying a kohen. But otherwise, she wouldn't be disqualified like the rabbis hold, which is not, right? The rabbis, which is the position we hold by, thankfully, is we don't disqualify her from marrying a kohen just because she's an aylonit. Okay? Now, moving on to the next Mishnah. Saris chama, kohen. Okay, so we have a saris chama. Remember, that's someone from birth who has an issue, can't have children, but he gets married. Now, he's allowed to marry because he's not a ptsua daka or kutshuvcha. That's only someone that's man-inflicted. Saris chama kohen shenasa bat Yisrael. So if you have this saris chama kohen who marries a bat Yisrael, ma'achila betruma. Now we're going to get to laws of truma. So he enables her to eat truma. Okay, now this should be quite obvious. If it's a legitimate marriage, then of course she can eat truma. Any legitimate marriage, kohen with someone else who doesn't normally eat truma, right? But if he's a kohen and she's not, she gets to eat truma now because she's part of his household. So the Gemara will ask, when we get to the Gemara, why are you telling us this? It's pretty obvious. Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Shimon, we're now switching topics to an androgynous. Okay, androgynous is someone who has both signs of both genitals of male and female. So the question is, how do we rule on this kind of person? Now, there's a lot of, our Mishnah is going to clearly be siding on the fact that we treat him, and I say him, like a male, because they're going to call this androgynous male for all sorts of purposes. Now, we're going to see on Pei Gimel, we're going to get more into this, because this Rabbi Yosi opinion we're going to discuss here, which says he can feed her truma, because it's as if they're legitimately married, because we treat him like a male, is going to seem to be saying something. Otherwise, there's a braita that says Rabbi Yosi has a different opinion, and we're going to try to figure this out. It's not really so clear cut like it makes it seem in this Mishnah. Okay, this Mishnah makes it seem pretty clear cut. We treat an androgynous like a male, according to a bunch of different opinions in this Mishnah. But the issue is not so clear cut, and usually an androgynous is treated as a suffix. And there's a debate about in the Lamdos, like how to view this suffix of an androgynous, which is, do we view this androgynous as we don't, right? He has male and she has male, female genitals. So therefore, do we say they're suffix? We don't know, is it more male, more female, and how do we treat it? Or some say that this is what we call a bri'a b'fnei atzma. It's a unique thing. It's not male and not female. And we'll treat it sometimes like each or suffix, not because we don't know what to call it, but it's something else entirely, and something that doesn't fit the general criteria of male, female. Okay. And therefore male or female. And therefore we want to put it into what we define as, male, female, but it's something entirely different. It's not that we don't know, is it male, is it female, more like it's its own unique thing. And then the rules, are they more like male or female? And it would be different conceptual framework of how to view it. Any case, let's stick with now our, instead of getting up in conceptual, but what does the Gemara say, the Mishnah say? So Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Shimon, androgynous kohen shenasa bat Yisrael ma'achila betruma. So an androgynous kohen who marries or bat Yisrael would enable her to eat truma. Now this seems to say it's a valid marriage, right? He's male and she is female, so therefore perfect, right? He marries a female. The androgynous is treated like a male, so he can, right? If he's a female, if the androgynous, she is a female, then she wouldn't be able, right? If there was a marriage with another female, that wouldn't enable her to eat truma. So they're clearly treating the androgynous as a male. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, tumtum shenikra v'nimtza zachar lo yachlotz. A tumtum is a different situation. There, we don't know what the genitals are. There's like a piece of skin or something covering it. And let's say that skin tears and it turns out that the genitals there is zachar, lo yachlotz mipnei shu saris. Okay, they say a tumtum can't have children, and therefore he is considered a saris. So even though he could have, right, we found out he is a male, okay, but still doesn't do chalitza because he's treated like a saris. Androgynous nosei aylonit. Going back to this androgynous, and I said we'll see in this Mishna a lot that we treat the androgynous like a male because they say the androgynous can marry, meaning, right, the verb is on who does the marrying, the male. So if he marries, it means he can marry a female, okay, and the marriage is valid. But aylonit, but can't be married by a man because, again, we treat the androgynous as a male and not a female. So if a man was to betroth him, that wouldn't work because we treat it as a him, okay? Now, there's going to be a debate in the Gemara tomorrow. Does nosei mean that lichatchila ab initio he can go out and get married? Or does it mean if the androgynous happened to betroth a woman, we'll count that as a valid marriage? Okay, maybe it's not ideal though. Maybe the androgynous shouldn't go ahead and do that because it's a fake, we're not sure. Or does it mean, no, it sounds like ideally they can just go out and betroth a woman, marry a woman. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, androgynous chayavim alav skila kezachar. Another opinion, and we're going to have to see in the Gemara later, on what count does he disagree with Tanakama? But Rabbi Eliezer says that an androgynous, if engaged in relations with a man, would get skila, which is the punishment given for someone who engages in sexual relations, a man with another man. So that also we're going to deal with in tomorrow's daf. Today we're going to get off on a big tangent into a very fascinating topic that's a real basic sugya in a lot of sugyot and shas about laws of nullification. Now, you might say, how on earth are we going to get to laws of nullification here? Well, you will see. So first the Gemara asks, Pshita, isn't the first halacha obvious? We're going to deal with the saris chama, and then we'll move on to the androgynous. So why is the saris chama, did they have to tell us he can feed his wife truma? Of course he can, right? She's basically, right, his wife. So what's the issue? He can marry, and therefore it's not an issue. So the Gemara says, Ma'u detema molid ma'achil. She'eno molid eno ma'achil kamash malan. You might have thought, we've seen this a bunch of times, that, I believe so, that it says, Yilid beito yochal, right? Or yochelu. All the people in his household who were born into his household get to eat truma. But they read it as ya'achilu, not just yochelu, can eat, but ya'achilu will feed. Someone who can bear children can feed truma. And there's this assumption maybe, or that one might think that someone who can't bear children, like a saris chama, it's true he's allowed to marry, but he can't bear children, he can't have children, he can't, have his wife give birth to children through him. So therefore, if you can't give birth to children like saris chama, maybe you're not allowed to feed someone else truma. And that's why the Mishna tells you, no, you can't. Okay, don't think that. Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Shimon omrim androgynous. So now we're going to get into so according to the Mishna, it says machila betruma. Now the Gemara is going to talk about a very big machloka between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about this. Amar Rabbi Reish Lakish, machila betruma, as it says in the Mishna, okay, everyone thinks you can give her truma, ve'en ma'achila b'chaze v'shok. But you can't feed her the chaze v'shok, that's the breast and the thigh, which are parts of the sacrifice that go to the kohen. Those are called matnot puna, right? Certain matnot puna. They go to the kohen also. She can't get that. Now, normally the wife of a kohen gets that. The wife of an androgynous doesn't get that. Okay, we don't yet know why. We'll see. Rabbi Yochanan omer, af machila v'chaze v'shok. It's the same as truma. The Mishnah says truma, it means any gifts the kohen gets can go to his wife. So, right, any ones that are, right, there are certain things a kohen gets that are only for male kohanim, like the meat of the chatat, for example, a sin offering, but that's not right. He means any gifts that can go to the wife of a kohen will go to her as well, to the wife of an androgynous. So now they say, Reish Lakish, ma'ishna chaze v'shok, deoraita. right? What's the difference? So we're assuming chaze v'shok is by Torah law. Well, truma nami deoraita. So we don't understand Reish Lakish. If she can eat truma, which is a Torah law, right? We know it's a Torah law. It says so in the Torah. Truma goes to the kohen. So if she can eat truma, which is a Torah law, chaze v'shok is also a Torah law. So why would Reish Lakish distinguish truma and chaze v'shok? Right? At first, the Gemara thinks that Rabbi Yochanan makes the most sense. So they answer, they say Reish Lakish meant truma nowadays. After the destruction of the temple, Reish Lakish holds, and this is the basis of the machloka between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish holds truma bisman hazeh after the destruction of the temple is only rabbinic. The laws of truma don't apply after the destruction of the temple on a Torah level. And the rabbi said, we're going to keep truma going. Right? And that's why chaze v'shok is deoraita. And that's why she doesn't get it. Meaning, even though we read the Mishna as assuming an androgynous is treated like a male, no, the androgynous is treated like a male for Rabbanan laws, not for deoraita laws. He can't really feed his wife truma because maybe the androgynous is not male. Maybe the androgynous is female, in which case she doesn't get truma, the wife, because they're not really husband and wife. So that's what we say. So now they say, wait a minute. So wait, if you're saying truma bisman hazeh derabanan, and that's why she gets it. So now you're going to say truma bisman beit hamikdash, which was deoraita, you wouldn't get, right? But if that's what he's saying, then the Mishnah doesn't really make any sense. Adatane ein ma'achilim b'chaze v'shok. That's if you're going to say, right, she doesn't get chaze v'shok. Liflog v'litnei b'dida. You should have said, it should have said in the Mishnah, it should have been more specific and said, it should have said, we only mean truma d'Rabbanan, but not truma d'Oraita. So they bring that as a question on Reish Lakish. And then they say, so they say, this is really what it means to say. Okay, and what Reish Lakish is saying when he says not chaze v'shok, what he really means is not chaze v'shok and not truma d'oraita. Kishehu ma'achila, this is how you should read it. When he feeds her truma, ma'achila b'truma b'zman hazeh d'Rabbanan. He feeds her truma that's relevant today, right, which is d'Rabbanan. Ve'en ma'achila, but now they say, en ma'achila b'zman chaze v'shok afilu b'truma d'Rabbanan. He doesn't, Reish Lakish didn't mean any truma d'Rabbanan he can feed her. No. What he meant to say was there's a difference between time of the temple and not time of the temple. When he says not chaze v'shok, what he really means is not anything in the time of chaze v'shok. Meaning, in the time of the temple, he couldn't feed her anything, not chaze v'shok, not truma d'oraita, and not even truma d'Rabbanan. Why? The emachila bisman chaze v'shok afilu truma d'Rabbanan dilma, right? So chaze v'shok even or truma d'Rabbanan in the time of chaze v'shok dilma ate le'ochla v'truma d'oraita. If we let the androgynous allow his wife to eat truma d'Rabbanan in the time of the temple, when there's now what's truma d'Rabbanan? It's a case where we're not sure if there's truma or not, right? And the rabbi said, well, we're going to count that as truma. So if we allow him to feed his wife that, she might end up eating regular truma. So what he distinguishes not chaze v'shok and truma, what Reish Lakish is distinguishing is time of chaze v'shok versus time of truma d'Rabbanan. Basically, his cutoff is during the time of the temple. She couldn't get anything. Once the temple was destroyed and there's no chaze v'shok and there's only truma d'Rabbanan, then she's allowed to eat truma because it's all d'Rabbanan anyway. Okay, and that's what he means to say. Okay, so now we've established their opinions. Okay. Now, Rabbi Yochanan amar ach machila v'chaze v'shok, but he thinks she can even eat chaze v'shok, right? Meaning all d'oraita truma is no problem, chaze v'shok is no problem. So now the first question we're going to ask is, does Reish Lakish really hold that truma is d'Rabbanan, and where does he get that from? And then we're going to have Rabbi Yochanan, who basically shows he's wrong, and then we're going to show Rabbi Yochanan's approach, and then we're going to have to say, how does Reish Lakish answer that? For that, there's going to be 3 answers. We're only going to have 1 in today's daf. Okay, the sugya is going to continue through to tomorrow. Then, just to give you the structure, then we're going to ask the same question, Rabbi Yochanan. First, we say, did Reish Lakish really hold truma b'zman hazeh as d'Rabbanan? So later, we're going to ask, does Rabbi Yochanan really hold the truma b'zman hazeh as d'oraita? Okay, we're going to basically, there's assumptions made about the sugya. You have to remember, the assumptions made are very clear. The assumption is, right, we don't know what Reish Lakish said, she doesn't get chaze v'shok. Rabbi Yochanan said she gets chaze v'shok. That's their machloket. The assumption underlying this is truma d'Rabbanan or not nowadays. So we're going to basically question both those assumptions. Okay, so now, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, and it's the assumption that Reish Lakish makes himself. It's not like the Gemara made an assumption. Reish Lakish basically says truma is d'Rabbanan. Okay, just to make sure everyone has this very clear. Truma nowadays is d'Rabbanan. Therefore, she can eat all of that because d'Rabbanan will say he's a zachar. Okay, but if it was Torah law, no way, no how. Okay, so is that really true? Is truma really bisman hazeh d'Rabbanan according to Reish Lakish? Amalei in Reish Lakish says, yeah, I do think truma bisman hazeh d'Rabbanan, and I will prove it to you. So he says, Amalei in shani shoneh. I'm going to pull out a braita. My braita says, igul be'igulim ole. Let me give you background before we even start this. We need a lot of background for this. Like I said, we're going to get to basic laws of nullification. If you have, okay, we'll go with the classic example. Your milk falls into, a drop of milk falls into your pot of chulin. So what happens? If you have, okay, by Torah law, if a whole container of milk falls into a big pot of chulin, as long as you have more chulin than milk, it's fine. You can eat it. But the rabbis came and said, what are you talking about? That's going to taste like milk, right? Even if, right, the majority is meat, it's still going to have the taste of milk. So the rabbi said, no tein ta'am. Whatever gives flavor is a problem. So they estimated that's 1 in 60. So normal laws of nullification are 1 in 60. There's a few exceptions to the rule. Truma is 1 in 100. Orla and kilei kerem, which we're going to get to, which is kilei kerem. Orla is the fruits for the first 3 years on your tree. Kilei kerem are when things grow together. You have a vine that connects with things growing in the ground, and they grow together. You know, something that grew from the combination has to be burned. And if some got mixed up with others, it is batel in 1 in 200. Okay, so now, but there's a few cases where laws of nullification don't work at all, no matter what. What would that be? So the case we're going to discuss today is a dvar chashuv, something of importance. What creates something of importance? So different things. I'll give you an example. Why are people crazy about bugs in lettuce, broccoli, right, and all this? Why are they crazy about it? Because a bug obviously could be canceled in 1 in 60 without a problem. But theoretically, right, if it falls into something, you wouldn't know it, right? It's definitely batel. But what's the problem? It's a creature. It's an entire creature. That already makes it important. That's why, for example, if you make broccoli, roasted broccoli, and you have a bug in it, it's a major problem. If you cook it up, make it, let's say you blend a soup with broccoli in it and it gets crushed up, right, in your blender, and your bug gets crushed up, okay, not to say that you want to be eating that bug, but it will be nullified, okay? It'll be canceled because it's no longer a creature. It doesn't have significance anymore. Obviously, only if it's one little bug in a big pot of soup that it'll be 1 in 60. But that's the idea of importance. Something that's in its entirety, it's a bria, also it's a creature. It's a live thing. So, right, even if it's dead in your soup at this point, but it was an importance. Now, we're going to talk about something else that has importance. What is it? It's something that's sold by the unit, okay? So if I sell, what we're going to talk right now is about a cake of figs. They would take figs, press them in, okay? You can sometimes find this in a store, more particularly in Israel, I would say. But pressed figs, okay, they're stuck together in a cake formation. That is sold generally by the unit, okay? You buy a cake of pressed figs. Like you go to the store, you buy a cheesecake, right? You buy, where we're heading toward Shavuos. You don't buy 10 pounds of cheesecake. You buy a cheesecake, right? An item. You buy 2 cheesecakes. You buy 3 cheesecakes. So, you might buy them, they might weigh them, but no, usually you buy them by the item. Now, there's 2 ways that that an item can be like this. There's items that exclusively get sold by the item, by the unit. And then there's things that get sold usually that way, but sometimes you might just buy a bunch of them, right? I was thinking, I went to the store the other day, I bought a bunch of aluminum tins. So I get to the counter, the guy says, how many did you take? I didn't care how many I took. I just took a stack. I know I need a bunch in my house, so I took a stack. Now, in the store, though, he needs to count exactly how many. So it's right now, you can think theoretically, maybe some, it wouldn't really happen nowadays, but theoretically, I could go into a store, give a pile, the guy will estimate, okay, you have about 10. He won't bother counting and he'll just sell it to me like that. Okay, because I'm just buying a stack of them. They're not even worth that much each on their own. But theoretically, he would just kind of say, okay, you have about 10. I'll just sell it to you like that. So we're going to distinguish between items that are like that and items that are only sold by the item, okay, by the unit. So comes Reish Lakish, that's background for what we're going to get into. Comes Reish Lakish and he says, how can I prove to you that truma b'zman hazeh is d'Rabbanan? Because these fig cakes are important, okay, they're what we call dvar chashuv. It's an important, it has significance. You sell them by the unit. Maybe sometimes you'll sell them by estimating, oh, you've got a whole pile, I'll just sell it to you for this price. But normally it's sold by the unit, which means, according to Reish Lakish, it means it's a dvar chashuv. Laws of nullification do not apply. And yet, what does the braita say? If you have a fig cake that's made of truma figs, and it falls into a pile of fig cakes that are not truma fig cakes, ole, okay, this means we have this and that, it means it's nullified. Now, if you say igul vela is the dvar chashuv, this fig cake, then how could it be nullified? If truma is d'oraita, and this is significance, there's no laws of bitul. So comes Reish Lakish and he says, this proves my point. Truma nowadays is only d'Rabbanan. That's why even though it's a dvar chashuv, it will be batal, because truma anyway is only d'Rabbanan. If it was by Torah law, there's no way it would be canceled. That's his proof. Comes Rabbi Yochanan and he says, what are you talking about? Mi savart, kol shadar koli manot shaninu, et shadar koli manot shaninu. Okay, now I'm going to explain this a little bit better when we go on, but I'll already tell you right now, which is there's a debate and we're going to see in this Mishna in Orla, which talks about laws of nullification, and this dvar chashuv, something that is sold by limanot means you do it by the item, by the unit. But there's a difference in how to read what Rabbi Meir says. Is it kol shadar kol limanot or et shadar kol limanot? What's the difference? Kol shadar kol limanot, think about the word kol is inclusive, okay? Because otherwise it's very hard to remember which is which. Kol is inclusive. That means anything that is mostly sold by unit, but could be sold by estimation, is considered a davar chashuv. So comes that, and that's how Reish Lakish read the Mishna that we're going to read in a minute. But do you hold kol shadar kol limanot shaninu? You must hold that, but it's not true. You're wrong. Et shadar kol limanot shaninu. In that Mishna, which discussed something else, they meant it was when Rabbi Meir said it's not batel, it's only things that are exclusively sold by unit. And igulei dvela doesn't fall into that category. Igulei dvela is mostly sold by unit, but not exclusively. Et shadar kol limanot means only things that are exclusively sold by unit. That's the first thing he says. And then he said, oh, I skipped a line. I'm sorry. He has 2 points. I read the second one first by accident. Amar le, so go back a few lines, okay, 5 lines from the bottom. Amar le, the halo ani shonet. You bring me that source, I'm going to bring you another source that contradicts what you're saying. Shchaticha bechatichot ole. I have a braita that says one piece of meat, okay, now what kind of meat? Chatat meat, sacrificial meat, that's mixed up with other meat. Okay, we don't yet know what kind of mixture. We're going to talk about this later. Mara's going to go back and say what kind of meat mixed up with what kind of meat. But it's clearly sacrificial meat can be nullified. So before we get to that second point, which I'll review again, his first point is, you say igulei dvela is ole because it's rabbinic. But it's not true, because I have another braita that shows something that's by Torah law. Sacrificial meat is a Torah law that it's sanctified and can only be eaten by a kohen. And if it, right, the particular type of sacrificial meat we're talking about is a chatat here, we're going to see, which can only be eaten by a male kohanim. So the meat of a sin offering, that gets mixed up with something else, laws of nullification apply. And it's Torah law. So you can't tell me, and it's just as significant, the meat is sold no differently than the igulei dvela are sold. So his first point is, you want to prove to me that it's d'Rabbanan because it says it's nullified, and it wouldn't be nullified if it wasn't d'Rabbanan. It's not true, because here's a case of doraita that's nullified. And secondly, it must be because you think kol shedar kol imano. Things have significance even if they're not exclusively sold by weight, but by item, but mostly sold by item. And I'm telling you, you're wrong. That's not the way it works. So first, the Gemara says, "Mai, where is this thing about et shedar kol and kol shedar kol?" And here we're going to read it right now. It's not. It's the Mishna in Orla. Misha hayu chavilei tiltan shel kalei keren yidalku. Okay, even though it's in Orla, it's talking about kalei keren. Like I said, this mixture of things that grow, a vine that goes and grows together with things in the ground. They were planted near each other and they combined and they grew this combined thing, kilai. So now it has to be burned. Okay, so if you have bundles of tiltan, seems to be some clovers, maybe fenugreek, so that has to be burned. Nit arvu, moving out amabet, nit arvu ba'acherim, kulam yidalku. If they mix up, you have a bundle of these that are kilei keren, which are forbidden, have to be burned, and they fell into a pile with a lot of other bundles. Everything has to be burned according to Rabbi Meir. No laws of bitul apply. Why not? We're going to see in a minute. The rabbis say, no, it's bata like regular kilei keren, 1 in 200. Comes Rabbi Meir and they explain, the Mishnah explains, Shaya Rabbi Meir omer, kol shedar kol imano mekadesh. The chachamim omrim, eno mekadesh ela shisha dvarim bilvad. Came Rabbi Meir and he said, the reason why these bundles, a bundle, how do you sell bundles? You only sell bundles by the bundle. You count how many bundles do you have and you sell that amount. So he comes and says, the reason these are not nullified, normally kilei keren will be 1 in 200. This can't be nullified because it's significant. Why is it significant? Because it's sold by the bundle. This is where Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan have a debate. Is it, notice here it says kol shedar kol imano, which is Reish Lakish's version. And Rabbi Yochanan is going to come and say, no, that's the wrong text. The words are et shedar kol imano. In other words, these bundles, right, they represent, according to Rabbi Yochanan, something that's exclusively sold by bundle, not like the fig cakes and not like the pieces of meat, which could sometimes be sold by estimation. Okay, so Rabbi Meir basically says, in simple words, this is significant because it's sold by the bundle. And that's why it's never bata. And the rabbis say, Eino mekadesh, you're not going to, mekadesh is a word from the text about kilei keren that it has to be burned. Eino mekadesh ela shisha dvarim bilvad. There's only 6 items that have significance. He doesn't think, right? Rabbi Meir has a more broader definition, even if according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's less broad than we think, okay, than Rabbi Reish Lakish thinks. But he says there's only 6 particular items that are considered important enough. And Rabbi Akiva Omer Shiva, he adds a 7th. Eluhen, what are they? Egozei perech, okay, walnuts that grow in the city perech. Rimone bedan, this is like when you go to a store and you buy the particular, the California mangoes or right? It's like they do this the best. Okay, the rimonim that come from badan, the chaviyot stumot, the rimonim or pomegranates, a sealed barrel. If you have a sealed barrel of wine, obviously that has significance, right? We're talking about a barrel, not like a bottle. Chalf, and it's sealed. Chalfei tir chadin, okay, these are the stalks of the beets, which are right like what's it called, Swiss chard, or the stalks of the the beets, and they're like tered, they're spinach-like. That's why they call them tradin. Kochei kruv, the stalks of the cabbage. Dilat Yevamot, the gourds that come from Greece. And Rabbi Akiva mosif af kikarot shabal habayit. Rabbi Akiva adds even homemade loaves of bread. Okay, these are all things that have significance and won't be batel. And Rabbi Meir includes many more things and says, no, anything sold by the item. But the big debate between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, and that's what we're going to see right now, right, is it only things sold by the item, or is it things that are mostly sold by the item, but sometimes sold by estimation? But before we get there, we're going to say, Haruyim le'orla, we're still in the Mishnah, Haruyim le'orla le'kilei keren kilei keren. If you notice this list of 6 or 7 items, some of them grow from the ground and some grow on trees. Now, kilei keren is only relevant for things that grow on the ground because it's a vine that combines with something that grows on the ground. And, right, so it could be the wine, right, or any of the bread, right, the bread that comes from the ground, and right, any of those things. Orla can only be things that grow from the trees. So the rimonim and the egozim, right? Those are things that grow in the trees. So this list splits into things that are relevant for laws of Orla and things that are relevant for laws of Kilei HaKeren. That's a very insignificant point for our purposes. So now here comes the significant point. Rabbi Yochanan savar et sheder kol imanot sheninu, Reish Lakish savar kol sheder kol imanot sheninu. So again, each reads the Mishnah in a different way, and that affects their opinion. So again, let's just review. Reish Lakish had said, I'm going to prove to you the truma b'zman hazeh is Rabbanan because of this braita that says igulei dvelav truma that get mixed up with others are nullified. And generally, right, we wouldn't say this fig cake would be nullified because it's kol sheder kol imanot. It's mostly sold by unit, even though sometimes not. And the fact that it's batel is only because it's rabbinic. Comes Rabbi Yochanan disagrees on two notes. He says, number one, there's a braita that says that even meat of chatat, which is doraita, is canceled, can be nullified. And number two, you misread the Mishnah. The Mishnah, the version of the Mishnah you have is the wrong version. It's et sheder kol imanot, and the reason why the igulei dvela and the chatat meat gets nullified has nothing to do with doraita to Rabbanan. It's because it's sometimes sold by measurement, and therefore it's not important enough. Things that are important that don't ever get nullified are only things that are exclusively sold by unit. So now the Gemara wants to know, my chaticha, where's this braita? What is it that Rabbi Yochanan quoted? A piece of meat of what, and what was it nullified into? What are we talking about? So, the tanna, as it says in a braita, chaticha shel chatat tme'a, shenitarva b'mea chatichot shel chataot teorot. We're now going to learn there was meat from a sin offering mixed up with meat in a sin from a sin offering. It was all chatat, sanctified. What was the difference? One became impure and the other ones didn't. Now, impure meat you can't eat. So if one becomes impure, you have to burn it. So if one becomes impure and it falls into a thing of lots of pure meat, then we're going to say laws of betel apply. You have slices of bread from the lechem apanim, the showbread in the temple, which is again is sanctified. It became impure and it got mixed up with lots of lechem apanim that wasn't impure. Again, you're going to have to burn the whole thing, and therefore ta'aleh. Comes Tanakh and says laws of betel apply. Okay, this is what we're going to say is a huge loss, okay, because you're going to have to burn everything. And it's not important enough because, again, it's usually sold by unit, but sometimes not. And that's how Rabbi Yochanan understands this. Rabbi Yehuda omer lo ta'aleh. Rabbi Yehuda says none of this is batel. Why? We're going to see at the end of today's daf, beginning of tomorrow. I don't know if we'll read it, but really answered in tomorrow's daf, which is he holds min b'mito lo batel. If you have two of the same items, meat and meat, bread and bread, never batel. It's only milk into chulin, because milk into chulin will be overpowered by the chulin if there's rov, or chishim, according to the rabbis. Rabbi Yehuda says if you put two things together that are the same, one doesn't cancel out the taste of the other, and therefore the taste of the meat is always there, or the taste of whatever it is, and therefore he doesn't think this is ever batel. But we're not dealing with his opinion right now. Aval, the braita continues, and this isn't relevant for our purposes, but it is in the braita, so we'll read it. Aval chaticha shel chatat tehora. If you have sin offering meat that's pure, shenitarva b'mea chatichot shel chulin tehora, gets mixed up in 100 pieces of non-sacred meat that's pure. V'chein, same thing with prusa shel lechem apanim tehora, shenitarva b'mea prusot shel chulin tehora. Your lechem apanim bread got mixed up, which was totally fine; it wasn't impure, and it gets mixed up in 100 slices of regular bread. Dvar kol lo ta'aleh. Nobody thinks that betel applies. Why not? Part of the laws of betel is we don't want you to have a financial loss. In this case, there's not a huge financial loss. There's a bit of a financial loss, but not big enough to allow betel. Why? Because it's not impure. So who can eat it? A kohen can eat it. So you can sell the whole thing. Go find a kohen you can sell it to. Now, the price is going to be low because he knows it's messed up. So you're going to lose a little money. But you can sell it to a kohen and it can be eaten by a kohen as opposed to the impure, which is going to have to all be burnt. Okay, so that's where we get, that's the case. Now they come and they say, this disagrees with Reish Lakish, because what's Reish Lakish going to say here? Doraita, it's nullified, even though it's dvar chashuv according to him. So, katani miat reisha ta'aleh. How does Reish Lakish, right? It says it can be nullified in the reisha, the first part, right? They're forgetting about the second part right now. So the question is, how does Reish Lakish read the source? For this, there's going to be three answers. We're only going to see the first right now, and we'll finish today's stuff right now. It must be the meat was crushed. The meat got crushed. We're talking about crushed meat. This is what you call a nukimta. The braita says meat. It didn't mean meat. It meant crushed meat. Okay. And then it's not significant anymore, right? Nobody would sell crushed meat by the item. It would be like smush meat, like a stew or I don't know what, but it would be crushed. You wouldn't sell it by the item anymore. So, my time into Rabbi Yehuda. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say laws of bitul don't apply? If it's crushed, why should Rabbi Yehuda say that? And that's what I said before, because Rabbi Yehuda l'tamei damar min b'mino bat. Okay, we're going to have basically these three answers. We're going to have questions on all of the three answers. How does Reish Lakish read the chaticha source? Okay, so the first answer is it's crushed. We'll get to the other answers tomorrow. And this was all a question on, again, Reish Lakish says it's d'Rabbanan truma, and that's why the igulim are nullified. And this shows, no, even d'oraita can be nullified. And then how does Reish Lakish explain that according to his theory that only d'Rabbanans can be nullified, not d'oraitas? So again, he's going to have to say, maybe it's not a dvar chashuv because it got crushed, okay? Or maybe two other reasons that we'll see in tomorrow's stuff. With that, I'll wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.